Welcome, everyone, to Monday Afternoon Roundtable, episode 22, guys. 22.
We're moving up, ain't
We're
we?
getting there.
We got 1,000 people on our website now, so that's good. And we're working hard to get more. We've got a topic today we're going to talk about is capital punishment and the death penalty, because it's something that we've all been involved in with our cases that we work, or especially our capital cases that we're hired on. But we've all been involved in capital cases as law enforcement officers in some way or another, so especially you two. And so I wanted to kind of talk about capital punishment, what it means, what it's about, kind of some statistics to go along with it, and just let our viewers know, because there's a lot of different opinions about the death penalty right now and capital punishment. So, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about the history of capital punishment.
Well, you got in North Carolina, pre-1910, it was up to the local jurisdictions to handle the executions. After 1910, the state took it over, and all executions had to occur at Central Prison. But before that, it was up to each county.
Right.
If he was found guilty of murder or rape back then, the next day was his hanging date. And that usually gave the executioner time to build what he needed to do.
The gallows.
Yep. That 1910 is when the Raleigh took it, the state took it over.
Right.
And how many were killed before, beginning of the North Carolina until 1910? Who knows?
And I want you to talk a minute about, and I just thought about this, and we've, in the pre-meeting of the video, we talked about capital punishment a little bit, but your dealings with the Tom Dooley case in Lenore, all of us remember the song, The Legend Tom Dooley, but his actual name was Tom Dooley, I think.
Correct.
And the crime was committed in Wilkes County.
On the county line, yeah.
The murder of...
Laura Foster.
Laura
She
Foster.
was a Caldwell County resident.
Right.
It was in 1865, right after the Civil War.
And then he was actually hung in Statesville. Downtown.
That was one of the first change of venue trials in North Carolina.
Is that right? So I was wondering why they hung him in Statesville, but I remember, and I'm just going to say this, and I want you to talk about it, but his last words, when they had him on the gallows, he said, do you have anything left to say? They said he talked for about 45 minutes about the clean rope and his dirty neck.
Gave a speech.
Yeah. But tell us a little bit about that.
It was a case where he came back from the Civil War. He was a local hero, and everybody liked Tom Dooley. He was dating several women of the community, and he started dating Laura Foster, who was a fine, outstanding young lady of Caldwell County and Happy Valley area. And she became missing, and a two-county area of people started searching for her, and they found her in a shallow grave. And they arrested Tom and his other girlfriend, Melton. I can't remember her first name. She was a Melton. They arrested them both for murder. And the governor of North Carolina, Zebulon Vance, resigned from being the governor to become Tom's lawyer.
Is that right? I did not know that.
That was in 1866. The trial cost North Carolina over $2,000,
Which was huge back then.
which was a O.J. Simpson style. And for him to get the change of venue, said he could not get a fair trial in Wilkes County, because he is so popular. So, I don't know. And some people will say, why Tom was so popular, he left Wilkes County to go to the war with his fiddle, and he came back carrying that same fiddle. And most men that had been in the war said he wasn't in much of a fight if he could carry that dang fiddle off.
And he was known as a ladies' man.
He was a ladies'
He
man.
must have been.
And he spread, what I read, he spread some
Syphilis.
disease, amongst the women partners.
Yeah. And then the legend, the song, Lay Down Your Head, Tom Dooley, Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley. All of us have heard that song. But what happened to the tombstone? You were involved in that.
That was Laura's tombstone.
Laura's,
Tom's tombstone it's about 6 feet wide and about 4 feet tall.
Nobody's going to steal it.
And people's been
Chipping it away.
But
Where's it? In Caldwell or
no,
Wilkes?
it's right on the other side of the county line, right inside there in Ferguson.
Okay.
But her tombstone was stolen back in the 80s, and the sheriff assigned me to work that case, and I got newspaper clippings from Florida, California,
I remember.
Texas.
How did you find it?
We even issued search warrants for some dorm rooms at App State. We had good information, but all the information, we couldn't find it. And one of the guys was emptying a dumpster with his big truck and seen it lay. They throwed it behind a dumpster.
Well, it's a good chance you ruffled the feathers of somebody who
Maybe.
probably did
Maybe.
steal it, and
Yeah.
they got rid of it.
Yeah. And it,
Yeah.
was it a fraternity frat thing or possibly a challenge or
Must
something?
have been, but
Or
I can't
if,
remember.
well, I
that.
can't. I don't know what the source was because you went up there, but that's pretty neat. And the fact that you found it, I remember all the articles about it, and I thought, wow, that's
During
pretty
the hanging the next day after he was convicted, over 4,500 people came to watch it.
cool. Yeah.
Back then you'd bring your kids and make them watch the hanging, the execution, and don't do crime because that's what's happened.
Well, and the rough mode of travel, that's a lot of people to come to.
That was another point. The sheriff argued to the judge, "This chains of venues killing me," because back then the judge could say, "We're going to need David and Jason tomorrow." Well, he'd write out a subpoena and give it to the deputies, and they had to get on their horses and ride. And back then, a subpoena was they took custody of you. They didn't serve you and say, "Now you be in court." They took you. They took you, and that was the sheriff was saying, "This is killing my department. All my people are in Statesville. No deputies are in Wilkes County."
Right. Yeah.
You know.
And I've been in a lot of old courthouses and government buildings back in my day, and there would be black and white photographs of hangings on the court square, and you go, "That's pretty morbid," but that was just a talking, thing. People come in and they would look at it and start talking about it, but I'm sure they've since been removed. But that was kind of the way it was back in the day. Anything else on the when did they go to the electric chair? Do you know?
Yeah, 1938.
Okay.
No,
That sounds-
19,
it's probably later than that.
1910 to 1938 was the electric chair. Then after 38 became the gas chamber.
Okay.
And then you had a 1998, the injection.
Well, there's a lot of people don't know this, but the actual electric chair at Central Prison has never been found, and they don't know exactly where it's at. They put it into storage at one time, and since that time, I think it's gone missing. And I've always heard that tale. Don't know how true that is, but it was. I got it from a pretty reliable source.
Old Sparky.
Yeah, Old Sparky is what they
Old
called
Sparky
it, and
was his name.
it was put up into storage, and then they never found it again. So somebody's got that electric chair somewhere. That's probably in their basement.
It's probably who got it is dead now,
Most likely.
and the person who has it unwillingly didn't know they got it probably.
And that was legend. So but I heard it from a really reliable source. So anyhow, in talking about capital cases, those are usually crimes that are the people that are eligible for the death penalty are almost always a brutal type murder, high profile, children involved. Sadistic kind of murders is what the capital case is. That's when the DA elects to do that. We think about how much government spends in capital cases, and I was doing a little bit of data searching. In 2020, the government spent $267 billion on law enforcement and corrections, and they tried to say, okay, is that changing the way we do police work and the way we do business? I haven't seen any changes because the numbers are actually going up. There's more than 5.5 million people in prison and jail and on probation in 2020, which is a slight decline, and 30% increase between 2019 and 2020, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, on murder. And the highest states, believe it or not, which I found kind of interesting, was Mississippi, Louisiana. They had a huge increase in the number of murders. Of course, Illinois with Chicago, Pennsylvania with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But
Do you think COVID them
had a
staying in the
big
house
number,
and
according
didn't?
to the
Yeah.
Center for Disease Control, that was one of the reasons that they felt that the crimes increased, or the brutal crimes increased. 77% of all murders in 2020 involved a firearm. That was a little higher than I thought. And then we'd look at, and they also said the George Floyd decision maybe had a little bit of increase in some of the cities with the violent crimes, which I found interesting as well. Another thing that's been on the media lately, there's been 118 mass shootings in the U.S. this year, already this year in 2023. In 2021, that was the worst year ever, where we had 690 mass shootings. In 2022, we had 647. So we're already pretty much per capita already over for 2023 if it continues like it is. The one that most people are familiar with is the Sandy Hook school shooting, where 28 people died.
Mostly kids.
20 of those were 6 and 7 year olds. That's right. And all the fallout from that. But one big thing from that shooting was that they were able to do a suit against Remington Arms. And that was the first lawsuit dealing with a firearm involving mass murders. And they succeeded in that case. Of course, Remington went bankrupt to kind of get out of paying. But then they had the second level of lawsuits where the InfoWars with Alex Jones, where they won considerable amount of money. Of course, he filed bankruptcy as well.
That was in the billions.
He was just a loudmouth idiot, in my opinion, still is and always will be, because he looked at that as a show, that it was all fake, that it was actors involved in this. There was really no children killed, and it was just done for gun control attention and to seek more people to fight gun control. In death cases, it's a long, drawn-out process, and which we all three know that. At some point before the trial, the prosecution has to announce that it's going to be a capital case. And when they do that, then it kind of changes the whole spectrum. In capital cases, they usually are always assigned two cases, first chair and second chair, two attorneys.
Two counselors, yeah.
Two counsel, first chair, second chair, and then they can hire their own private investigator to come in and help. But they have to hire a private investigator company to help out with the case. And we've all three been involved in those type cases. I think I have one capital case right now pending. Several murders that are non-capital, and when I say they're not treated the same way, there's a little bit of less emphasis, a whole lot of less money involved in a non-capital case. And then it's ultimately up to the jury to find a decision of whether the defendant's guilty or not guilty of the charge. That's the first phase of the verdict, or the jury's responsibility. Then the jury, if they're found guilty, they have to listen to the aggravating circumstances of the case.
Sentencing stage.
Right. And then the mitigating circumstances, and then the victim impact statements, which I think are the most important, where the victim's family can come in and actually speak. A little story, I was working a murder a while back, and there was the guy took a plea. And it was a handsome plea. He should have took it, and he did, but the victim's family come in to speak. And the lady got up and she talked, that she forgave the suspect for shooting her son, which I thought was pretty big on her part to come in and do that. And she was sorry about all that happened, but because she was a religious woman and had a strong faith, she forgave the individual. Well, he's sitting over there and big tears come in his eyes. And I'm sitting behind the family because we were a little bit worried there might be some issues there. Anyhow, after she spoke, he gets up and the judge said, "Well, do you have anything to say?" And he got up and said, "Yes." He said, "Ma'am, I really do appreciate you coming in and doing that." He said, "But your son was still a EMF."
Oh my God.
And the judge just went,
Oh
and
my.
of course, he got a pretty good sentence, and he was an older gentleman at that. So then after the impact statements, the jury decides the sentencing recommendations. The jury in North Carolina decides whether it's a death penalty or life without parole, which we call LWOP. In the majority, I would say, of death cases, capital cases, are reduced or pled out to LWOP. Case I worked where an officer was killed, I was assigned jury duty. I go up and I think I'm going to be relieved. And in fact, I was seated on that jury for an actual police officer murder, and it was a capital case. And before the jury was completely seated, after hearing during the voir dire, he elected to take the LWOP, and rightfully so, because he was guilty. It appeared to
Well,
be
that's a victory for the defense team. Anytime you can get
huge victory.
a person off of death row
That's their main goal.
to life, is a gain
Yeah, and that's what
and a victory.
it is. It's a victory for the individual as well. And some people say, and then the judge does the sentencing, of course. And Tim and I were there's one judge, a friend of ours, that when he would give a death sentence, it would make the hair on your back stand up. You remember it in Forrest Farrell, Superior Court Judge Forrest Farrell, one of the finest,
The
honorable Judge Farrell. He had a deep voice, and when he was standing, and after the sentencing phase was done, he would, call out that defendant and say, you're sentenced to death, to whatever the case was, and it was pretty scary to hear from a law enforcement officer's perspective. But there's a lot of pros and cons with the death penalty, and I think it falls back a little bit on the political spectrum, Jason. I think
it started in the 70s with, the Supreme Court got involved, and
Right.
from the 70s and until now,
right.
it's still a back and forth. Should we have it? Should we not?
Yeah, and it's a lot of the cons on the death penalty say, well, it's not a deterrent, and you and I talked about that a little bit the other day. And what's your opinion on that? Do you think it is a deterrent or not?
No.
Okay.
I think it was back Tom Dooley era, because the parents took the kids, said, "Now watch him die."
And it was such a violent manner of
Yes.
dying.
Yes.
It's not a deterrent today, according to statistics. And I mean, do you all want to talk about our opinions of the death penalty now?
No, right now, because I want to, because that's pretty in depth,
Okay.
and we'll get into that at the end, I think, if that's okay.
That's what I've
Yeah.
got plenty of statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me want to hear some of your statistics. I want to hear
All
what
right.
you got.
Well, first of all, these are for the United States. Most countries in the world do not have the death penalty. 6 out of 10 Americans favor some form of death penalty, with approximately 64% say it's ethical or morally justified. 56% of Americans say black people are more likely than whites to be sentenced to death for committing similar crimes. 63% say death penalty does not deter people from committing serious crimes. 78% worry that an innocent person can be put to death. All right, here's different categories of people that are in favor of the death penalty. Registered Republicans are in favor at 77%, registered Democrat at 46%. High school education or less, 68%. Some college, 63%. People with a bachelor's degree, 49%. Postgraduate degree, 44%. Whites, 63%. Hispanics, 56%. Asians, 63%. And blacks, 49%.
It's interesting.
Evangelical white Protestants, 75%.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
White non-evangelical Protestants, 73%. Black Protestants, 50%. Catholics, 58%. Atheist, 35%. Agnostic, 43%. And this is from a April 2021 Pew Research Center study, so it's
a valid
recent.
study. Yeah.
Currently, 27 states and the federal government have the death penalty. Out of those 27, 13 of them haven't carried out an execution in over 10 years, and 3 states, California, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, have imposed formal moratoriums on the death penalty by their governors. 23 states and the District of Columbia do not currently have a death penalty, and death sentences have steadily declined in recent decades. In 2020, there were 17 executions, and the most modernly was 1999 with 98 executions. Now, the average person that is executed in 2019, up to 2019, had spent 22 years on death row prior to being executed.
Wow.
And lastly, this is a December 2021 Bureau of Justice Statistics report, said 19 different states had removed a total of 91 prisoners from death row just in the year 2020.
Right. And some of your other facts here, and these are 2020 facts because it's hard to get anything 21, 22, 23 right now, but these are, most of them are 2020. But race of defendants executed 55.6 white, 34.1% black, and 8.4% Latinx, and 1.9% other. So, and then, race of victims in death penalty cases, 75% white, 16% black, which is, a little interesting. North Carolina was in the top 5 in death row prisoners by state. We have 138 on death row right now in North Carolina, with California leading with 690.
Who's our most famous person on death row in North Carolina?
Currently.
Yeah.
A lady, a female.
Black Widow.
What's her name?
Blanche.
Blanche Moore.
Blanche Moore.
Yes, she's been on for a while.
Since 96.
Yeah. She's killed. How many?
Well, she's only been convicted of one, but she was suspected of killing her dad, 2 husbands, a mother-in-law, and a neighbor.
Yeah.
So she's listed as a possible serial killer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Velma Barfield. Remember that?
Yeah, but they did a movie on Blanche, did they not? Black Widow?
I think they did, yes.
The movie?
And there's a book about Velma Barfield, a good book.
But she's at, what's the prison for the women?
North Carolina Central Prison for Women, or Prison for Women in Raleigh.
It's called something. It's not Central Prison for Women. It's something. But there's 2. She and another lady are on death row in Raleigh.
Wow. Yeah, I got their names. I saw there was just 2. Both those women are, one's black, one's white, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Velma Barfield, she killed her husbands. She'd put rat poisoning in their tea. And finally, a detective I know in Robeson County, he's the one that kind of said, hey, something smells here. And they exhumed the bodies, and they found the poisoning in all the bodies. And she was convicted, of course. I think it was 5 husbands that she killed. And they were all elderly, so it looked like natural causes. And but she, when she tested, she said, I didn't mean to kill them. I just meant to hurt them a little bit. Anyhow, but her son, and you guys might not know this, but Velma Barfield's son, you remember the Pro Putt Association where they on Saturdays
with Billy Packer as the announcer? Yeah.
He was one of the top putt players. Anyhow, his mother was on death row. When they executed her, she was executed in her nightgown, and they kept getting stays. They bring her in for the execution, the phone ring, governor give a stay. I think they did that multiple times.
She didn't think it'd go through.
Oh, nobody did. But they finally executed Velma, and she was put to death.
There was a case in 1934 where 2 Green guys, B.G. and Lester Green, were executed on the same day from Taylorsville. Do you know any history on that? They had to be brothers or daddy's son or cousins.
What year was it?
1934.
I do remember that because there was articles about it in the courthouse there, but I can't remember the details.
We need to dig up some B.G. and Lester Green.
That'd be a good follow-up.
I think it was a father-son. That's exactly what it was. It was a father-son because I got a picture of them, Tim.
They were both executed on the same day from Taylorsville. I said, well, there's a,
Now that you mentioned, I've got a photograph because there's the old sheriff, the Green daddy and son, and they look like the Bonnie and Clyde era times, and they've got a suit on. It was right after court in front of the courthouse steps where there's 2 highway patrolmen on both sides of them, and that's why I got the picture, and I've got it somewhere. It's a pretty cool picture.
You have to dig it out.
But they executed them. That's who it was, father and son. They robbed a drugstore in Taylorsville.
North Carolina's not had an execution since 2006.
Yep.
We have somewhat of a moratorium, an informal moratorium, don't we?
We do. That's exactly right. And just a little bit, and I won't go into great detail about it, but I had a chance to, I say a chance, I was called to witness an execution before I left the patrol as a lay witness to come in to say that the inmates did what they were supposed to do, that there was nothing done immoral or off color.
You're the state's witness.
Yeah. And when I came to the central prison that night, the execution was supposed to take place at 2 a.m. in the morning. I got there.
Why do they do that in the middle?
I guess because people are asleep and there's less publicity, or I don't know.
But they always are in the middle.
2 o'clock in the morning is when North Carolina does it. long story short, very long story, and it impacted me, especially about the death penalty and what it means. But the warden, when I got there, he said, "Okay, you're gonna be in the cell with Robbie, there'll be 2 guards in there at all times. You can talk to him, you can communicate with him, whatever you want to do. Just keep distance from him." But he was in a big cell, a watch cell, and got there at 10 o'clock. Well, he wasn't there, and the guard come and told me he's having his last meal, and he had lasagna, pizza, and a 2-liter Pepsi for his last meal. This is a pretty big boy. He was a big man. He was strong. He was a Muslim faith. Every 30 minutes he would get up and face the east and pray to Allah on his mat. He was writing letters the whole time that I was in there with him, and it was letters to family, letters to friend, and they might be one sentence. And there was I'll never forget this either. The minister, they had a pastor there with him who was a Baptist preacher. This guy was Muslim, and it was a little bit. And he wanted the Quran. He wanted to read the Quran, which that's what he was doing. And he was faithful. He understood the Quran and what it was about. And but he talked to me, and about that time at 11 o'clock, the news come on. And there was a television in there, and it was about his execution. He put down everything he was doing. But what I found odd too, every time he would write a letter, if he set the pen down, the guard would pick it up. I guess he could use it as a weapon. I don't know. And then there was another guard in there documenting everything he did, every step, everything that when he would go pray, they would time what time he went. But anyhow, the doors opened at about 1:15, I guess. A door in the back. I didn't even know there was a door there. It opened, and there was the warden. And he come in and he said, "Robbie, it's time." And so Robbie gets up. He didn't show.
Did he have him shackled or anything?
Yes, I think they had him handcuffed. He was in an orange jumpsuit. I don't know about shackles. I can't remember, Tim. But we walked down a long hall. It was 2 guards, Robbie, the warden, the secretary of the prisons at the time, me, and a couple other people. We walked down this long hall, and that cold chills were coming up on my back, and I'd never seen the gas chamber before, and that's where it actually takes place, and it's kind of an octagon-shaped room.
But he didn't die from the gas chamber.
No. They just used the gas chamber as the death chamber.
Yeah.
And it was a gurney laying there with, where his arms were out. They had a paramedic there that hooked him up. And then what I found interesting as well was behind the scenes, there was a black curtain, and I could see it off because I was with the warden and with the red telephone from the governor's office, buttons to see or monitors to show his life, his heartbeat, and his blood pressure and all this stuff. And he was hooked up every kind of way you can imagine. And then behind the black curtain, 3 guards. And they were all older guards. Mm-hmm. And they were standing there and they were drinking coffee, and I'm going, well, who were those guys? But the tubes for the injection were all intertwined. They were just all mangled up.
So you didn't know which.
And they had plungers, and they didn't know which one was plunging the actual death dose. I'm imagining. And there was 2 cocktails that are put together. I think they put Robbie, and at 2 o'clock, the phone didn't ring, and I was standing right there beside the phone, and if it rang, I would have probably jumped a foot off the ground, but it didn't ring. And I saw him when I first went in, the witnesses for Robbie, the victim of Robbie's killer, the one that he killed, Stephen Wilson Stafford, and I want to give his name because he was a gentleman. He was, they said, a fine fella from Winston-Salem, a father, a husband, and he was shot 5 times.
Was it a robbery?
It was a robbery gone bad. And Robbie had a pretty long, violent history, so it just went downhill from there. But anyhow, he showed no remorse during this time. The only time I saw him show emotions was when he called his mother on the phone. I think his mother visited right before his she got to see him and touch him and kiss him and all those things before the execution. I was extremely impressed with the warden because he did it on a personal basis. He didn't go overboard with anything, as well as the guards. And some of those guards said they witnessed several executions. I guess they used the same ones each time. Then they had a kind of a deactivation afterwards to give them any kind of mental help that they may need, or any kind of help they may need as far as how they handled that. or what they saw. And I was able to go to it as well, but I didn't. Anyhow, it took him, I think, 15 or 16 minutes to actually die. I think his time of death was 2:17 a.m., which was a long time because he was such a big man. There was a doctor there as well. And I remember him looking at me and said, it'll take some time because he's so big. It'll take a little
Does he
more time.
go unconscious prior?
He
or
was
to how-
praying.
how's-
You could see his lips moving, praying to Allah. And then you can just slowly, and then the heart. But what was bad, they had to get like a 1 minute flat line or something like that before they could call
Consistent.
him dead.
True death.
And then it would go beep. It would just beep. And they had to start over. I mean, they had to start the time over. So that's what kind of took
His
it.
body's naturally fighting
Right.
that process.
And he was healthy. He was a healthy man. Robbie was placed on solitary confinement because he punched a guard like 2 weeks before his execution time. And I remember him telling the warden to tell that guard he apologized that he did that because a lot of the inmates didn't like Robbie. I think because of his religion, maybe because of his race. I don't know all the things, but he wasn't one of their favorite people. And so he wanted to get out of the community group there and get into solitary, and they did. They put him in. But a little story about the pizza and lasagna, and I'll get off of this. But I remember he come in, and he was having terrible indigestion because of pizza and lasagna and a Pepsi. And he was used to bland prison meals I think he'd been in prison 15 years before his execution, if I'm not mistaken. But he was having heartburn terrible, and the nurse come in and says, Robbie, is there anything I can do for you? He said, well, I'd love to have Tums or some kind of antacid. She said, well, I can't give you anything. He said, well, I'm going to die in 15, an hour, 15 minutes or whatever. And he laughed. He had a kind of a sense of humor there at the end. And he talked to me. Robbie talked to me. He said, well, what do you do? And then we spoke back and forth a little bit. But it changed my mind a little bit about the death penalty. And that's where I want to go into our personal opinions about the death penalty, because everyone has one. And I'm going to start with myself. Personally, I think there does need to be capital punishment on the table. I think it should be there. Morally, I'm against the death penalty because I think it's cruel and humane. Lethal injection, however, is, in my opinion, not cruel and humane the way it's done. Some will argue that. Many will argue that. But in hideous cases, heinous crimes where children are involved, and of course, like we were saying the other day, if it was one of you two guys, hell yeah, I'd want the suspect to have the death penalty. But I think it's up to that jury, and I'm glad we let the jury decide if it's a death penalty. That way, it's not one person. It's not just the judge. So I'm in favor of capital punishment in limited situations, and that's kind of going both ways a little bit. I know
There will never be a day and time that we know this person is 1,000% guilty.
no, and has people been put to death that weren't guilty? Yes,
Yes, and are there people serving life sentences that probably need to be on death row? Absolutely.
I agree with that too, Tim.
But we've got to have it. I think if it is a small deterrent, we have to have it.
Yeah.
We're not using it right now in North Carolina, but
And it's been proven that the death penalty cases are extremely more expensive than those cases where an individual gets life without parole. And people kind of turn that around sometimes, especially in the political spectrum. They say, it costs too much, let's put him to death. Well, that's not the case. When you have a death capital case, you're spending millions of dollars on attorney fees, private investigator fees, holding the individual at different places, transportation, all the things that go along with it. So it's been proven that it's more expensive to execute than it is for life without parole. What's your opinion, Jason?
I'm torn as well. I'm gonna give my opinion based on different viewpoints.
Okay.
Based on my Christian beliefs, I would be against it in that it's a vengeful killing. Even though you have the eye for an eye, you're supposed to forgive. Just from that's easier for me to say sitting here than to practice. I have a moral issue with it. However, said if it was a family member, I would definitely want and need that closure. Here's the problem, though. they sit on death row for the average of 22 years. That's not closure. That's more problematic to me if I was a family member. I think it's not effective or efficient, and even cost-wise. And you bring up if one person that is innocent is executed, then you have a problem. So you're going to have more than one. However, let's talk realistic or reality. It is needed. It is a necessity. It needs to be tweaked and it needs to be changed, but we got to have it.
Yes.
It's not in our society, the way our society is, you got to have, it's not a strong deterrent, but it is a deterrent. To me, it's more, I would say it's more cruel and unusual to spend life in prison to have the death penalty. If I was I would say, go ahead and I'm guilty. Let's knock this out. Let's not drag it out, again. But the idealist in me is against it, but the practice, the realist in me says we got to have it. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Okay, Tim.
I'm same with y'all. We have to have it. If we don't, I would be worried.
Yeah.
It's not a big deterrent, but if it's a 2%, we still need that 2%. And if it was maybe a federal issue instead of each state deciding, because sooner or later it's going to reach the Supreme Court and it will become a federal issue, which it has since the mid 70s. But
with our conservative court right now, you know which way it'll go.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. But I would say if it does go to, again, make it A, B, C, D for every state.
Yeah.
Consistent. Well, and that's the problem now. You got many states, as you just talked about, that don't have a death penalty, and some that do, and then some that's got a moratorium going on for more research or for whatever reason. Let's talk a minute about the biases of capital punishment. The number of African American inmates that go to trial are found more likely to be found guilty, not necessarily put to death, but are found guilty of murder and serious crimes. And one of my thinking there is not necessarily the representation. I think everyone gets fair representation most of the time, but it's all about cost and financial and economics. Who you are, what you are, and how much money you have is what kind of defense you're going to get. So most people, a lot of them, cases we work, it's capital defender's office handling the case, not a private attorney or private counsel. Not saying they don't do a good job, because they do, because that's all they do. And there's one attorney I work with, and she's amazing. She works hard with her cases, and matter of fact, I'd like to have her on the show sometime. But they're not getting the private counsel that a lot of these, like the Alex Murdaugh got last week, and I see that as a problem.
It's a socioeconomic underlying factor, which then the facts of the race is you can't argue it.
No.
I mean, the numbers are there.
Right.
And that's based on the socioeconomics of the community.
And this has happened all of our careers. Why do you think more murders and homicides occur in the South than they do anywhere else in the United States? And they always have. In the South, the southern states. Is it education? Is it economics?
All the
financial?
Yeah.
Weather? Some say
more guns,
the humidity, more weapons. There's more guns on the street right now than there's ever been in the history of the United States, and that scares me. It scares me. And we've got to get some kind of gun control in place soon. And all of us have guns. We all carry guns for the most part. But there's got to be control. And the majority of the people want that. The majority of the voters is overwhelming. Over 70-something% said that we need strong, strict background checks on individuals. We need mental health.
Red flag laws.
Red flag laws. And I know they have saved lives. I know they have. So we've got to get our courts and our system and our politicians to understand this. But right now it's such a divide. I don't know if we'll ever see it in our lifetime.
Here, to play devil's advocate, just how we've all seen experiences where a person has appeared, quote unquote, normal, average citizen, no criminal background, and then one day they go crazy.
Yeah.
How is
mental health's a huge issue.
yeah,
Huge issue.
and that is the biggest issue. How are we going to have a law that stops that?
Well, we got to be able to identify for one, and the courts have to be able to recognize mental health. And they always send for evaluations. If it's a capital case, for sure, they're going to send the individual. And if it's an IQ of less than 70, then they are.
Yeah, how are you going to do that for a gun control law?
Well, gun control you couldn't.
Yeah, that's
I
what
mean,
I'm
talking about the
saying.
death penalty.
Yeah.
Gun control, no.
Or if you were,
That wasn't
you
good.
didn't pay the power bill.
Yeah.
Our TV just went out, so we just had a little power surge here. But I think we do anything on the monitor there, Mark, our producer
All
today.
right.
But what was I saying?
We're talking about
The red flag laws. If you have been in the seeing a psychiatrist, anything mental, you should have a semi flag or something.
yeah.
If you've cleared, everything's good, you're on the proper medication. Hey,
I don't think I can argue that point. What if an individual seeing a psychiatrist just for alcohol or for family problems, financial problems? You're talking about like an involuntary commitment type
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can
not
understand.
just your everyday.
Now, I've had 2 students that I know of that have voluntarily told me this in private that were involuntarily committed in their 20s. These are 2 separate people, didn't know each other. They were both in their late 40s or early 50s, never had any mental health issues afterwards, and it was an isolated incident. Everything was fine.
Good to go.
They were flagged because it shows,
That they had been involuntary
committed.
Were you able to give them a concealed
I gave them the class, but they weren't able to get their license.
concealed carry? And I get that, and I'm for that,
Yeah, and my thing is,
but within reason.
yeah, it's just, I know we're getting off topic here, and I'll shut up in a minute. And I just have a little, this is the libertarian in me, the part that some things are nobody's business. They're not the government's business. If I go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a preacher or a counselor over marital problems, or where are you going to draw the line at?
That's what we're arguing. Yeah, I
I
agree
don't.
with
I
that.
don't and it's
There's a fine line.
and my point is there's no perfect answer here.
Never will.
But there's
No.
got to be better than what we have.
Yeah,
We have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we're having
Had a
murders.
school shooting yesterday.
We did. And it's about every day you hear it now, and they'll come in on the news, school shooting or a office shooting or whatever, mass shooting somewhere.
what can stop that though?
Well, that's where we are. And it's
We're
going to
just. I don't know the answer to that.
it's going to take a change,
Yeah.
mental change and a political change, and it's something that's got to be done. But what's happening is the politicians are putting so much emphasis on it because they know their constituents
Money.
want gun control on one side, and then the other side, our constituents want more guns. There should be no control on guns. Manufacturers. I am glad that there's now, it's just like the cigarette industry. Now gun suppliers can be held liable. And it's still vague, extremely vague, but the Sandy Hook kind of changed that a little bit.
And that was based on the targeted audience of their commercial or their advertising.
AR-15,
Yeah,
yes.
targeting younger people. And you brought up something yesterday or the other day off camera about a certain motor company making commercials where they're doing burnouts.
Yeah.
In the commercial.
Yeah.
In the
Would that be like? I mean, that would be the same kind of.
And we're seeing that more and
Yeah.
more. Yeah, with the street racing and deaths associated with that. But I think we're liable for things we do. Attorneys are liable for things they do, especially physicians. I mean, so there's got to be some liability.
It would change the way they market. I mean,
Right.
it should. I get that.
Marketing's critical because they're marketing young individuals, vulnerable individuals that, okay, if I get a gun, they may have been, and so many of them have been abused or bullied in school, and I've seen that. And then they get that AR-15. They're the big boy then.
I will go reiterate that point you just made. There is a lot of people that have witnessed the offender prior to they offend, saying, where they have given out those red flags. They've said, "Hey, I got a hit list," or "Hey, I'm gonna get back at these," or
Right.
"Don't go to school that day," or whatever. And they just didn't take action on it. They thought, "Oh, nothing's gonna happen." The one good thing that is happening are people are reporting when
Coming
they
forward.
Yeah, that is a good thing that's changing for the better. the knowledge of, hey, he's just not saying that, or she's not just, they're, they might mean it and they may not, but you want to err on the side of caution.
Of course. Right. Yeah. And just another quick story on a murder case, capital cases I worked. He killed 2 individuals. He used his social media to figure out where to bury them or where to put them after he killed them, and they had all this. They had overwhelming evidence on our client, and he decided right when the case started that he was going to take the life without parole. And I thought that was, and like Tim said, that's a win for those attorneys, because they didn't want to see him, because he was going to probably be, because of his history, his character, his background, everything was negative. It was going to be hurting us with that jury. And they were able to explain that to him, and he took the plea, and his life was spared. Now he's going to be in the prison for the rest of his life, but good. And it was my job to go and do the research, to look at all the case, look at all the evidence, look at all the interviews, listen. It was hours and hours and hours of work. However, I think the right decision was made from the courts and from the client and the legal team that did it. It worked. The system worked in that case.
The system does work more times than it doesn't.
It does. Yes. But sometimes we miss the mark, and the evidence has got to be overwhelming before we, as a nation or as a state, put someone to death, in my opinion. And again, this has been a deep, kind of a dark subject, but it's been interesting for me. I've learned a lot just listening to you two guys, especially with the stats. Anything else?
This is one of those things that I have opinions on, but
everyone does.
But I don't know the answer. I don't even have a clear.
If you did, we wouldn't have to be working.
I know, but it's not. It's one of these. Is damn. I mean,
none of us on that jury with that officer, we couldn't give a clear definition or a clear idea of what we would do. None of us. I mean, we said, well, some of us were for it. Of course, everybody that was on that jury said that they would believe in the death penalty with restrictions, all the ones that had been seated. And so I'm like you. Nobody gave a clear, definite answer.
Yeah,
and it's tough. It's tough, and you don't know you're in that seat, or you're in that position. Now, like if it was a family member and we were the victims on the victim side, then you know how we would probably say, "Yeah, hell yeah, we want to put to death." And I remember in this case that I witnessed, the family wanted him. They said the execution was too easy because they witnessed. They said he just went to sleep. He should have been shot just like our daddy was or my husband was. He should have been put to death the same way. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing, like Tim said.
And death is death.
It is.
I mean, it's final.
Yeah. They put him in they cleaned him up and took him out. He was dead. So anyhow, again, this has been a good topic. I enjoyed talking about it. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have. Tune in next week. We got some other good stuff going on. We got go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, be sure we want your opinions on this because this is there's, everybody's going to have an opinion on this. Add to it, put it in there.
We have over 1,000 members now and growing. So.
And we appreciate that.
Yes.
And we're going to put more on our Facebook page about our topics that we talk about. And then some of these people listen on Spotify, some listen on YouTube or watch on YouTube. It's kind of funny to watch to see us three sitting here, but it's interesting. I want to give a shout out to it's called True Crime Garage. It's a podcast that I listen to about true crime. And it's the captain and the colonel are the two guys on the show, and they do a great job on talking about true crime cases. And they have an episode every week. Highly recommend it. It's a good show, and it's fun to listen to. Anyhow, anything else from either of you? We got a last call. We got a little special segment on our last call, and I hope you'll enjoy it. But we'll be back in just a few minutes with last call. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm glad somebody gave me the sissy shot because it's.
I'm good.
I appreciate it.
This one's going to be fun. Welcome back, everyone. Last call. we had
Last call.
We got an interesting one today, don't we?
We're
yes,
worried.
we do.
We're a bit nervous.
See the sweat beating up.
Especially the fact this is videoed. We've got we're going to make a toast to Rhonda Walker. Rhonda sent in and told us to start including a little vodka in our tasting.
Whew.
None of us, I don't think, Mark, we're not vodka drinkers. We're bourbon whiskey drinkers. And so to salute Rhonda and let her know that we're listening to what people say, what our listeners say, we're going to have a little shot of Tito's vodka before we start. Do not look at our face.
No.
Do not listen to our responses because I got a lot of people, my friends, drink Tito's, and Tito's I think is the top shelf
Oh, yeah,
vodka.
top
if
shelf
I'm not
vodka,
mis- and I got this at home in my bar. So
Mark,
anyhow.
you like vodka at all?
No.
All right.
Anyhow,
Rhonda, you see what you
Rhonda,
called?
This is for you.
You doing any?
Cheers.
Cheers, yeah. Whew. Damn.
It's not as bad as I thought.
I was going to say the same thing. It's not good, but sorry, Rhonda, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting.
I just don't ever shoot vodka.
I don't either.
Now, Rhonda, that was for you. Yeah, that was a little different there,
That's a good
Mark.
warm up.
Yeah, it was a good one. It's warm going
we'll be
down.
chasing cars after
Yeah.
a while or something. I don't know.
Okay, today our bourbon is a pretty little bottle here.
Yeah, it's nice.
Called Jesse James Bourbon Whiskey. We all know who Jesse James is or was. Made in the spirit of America's true outlaw. Old time charcoal mellowed, aged in oak cask, minimum of 36 months. Incredibly smooth, full bourbon character, which you're going to find out in a minute. And as Mark says, it's for the outlaw in you.
That's what it says.
And we're all outlaws, I guess. Or we try to be sometimes. Tim's going to pour today.
Well, we've all been divorced once, so we're outlaws to somebody, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
you had in-laws at
Yeah.
one time. Now you're the
Now we're
outlaws.
That's right.
Hell, I got 2 husband-in-laws. I saw a buddy yesterday.
He was a husband in it.
That's somebody that married your ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually,
I got 2 as well.
But are they out in-laws now? Or husband outlaw?
I only have one husband-in-law actually, and he's a good guy. He and I have drinks together, and I remember we went to.
Mine's a good guy too. I mean,
Yeah, oh, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I just think the world of him.
yeah,
And so we were at a
One of them's a
funeral.
little short, Tim.
That's Jason's.
yeah. I get that. I got the sissy when I get.
Okay. That's 2 in a row.
I'll own up to that. That's fine.
My first wife's dad, Sabrina's dad, died, and I was at the funeral in Florida. And of course, her husband Lewis was there, and I stood up. They were getting, everybody was speaking, and I introduced Lewis as my husband-in-law there that day, and he and I rode to the funeral in the same car. But he's
And
great.
he's a
great
good guy.
He's
Oh,
one
yeah.
of them,
Super good
and
guy.
his son's just amazing. Let's try this Jesse James bourbon and whiskey and see what we think.
It's a light color.
Very light.
Single barrel.
God, it's got a good smell.
I've never heard of Jesse James. This is, I think, one of the last of my gifts. This come from Police Chief Mike Concannon. He was a small department down near the North Carolina Zoo.
Ashboro.
He came on to work with us. This is the Chief Mike.
Chief Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Very smooth.
Wow.
A lot of flavor.
He said that was his favorite drink. And
My goodness.
Maybe that vodka knocked the edge off.
I was going to say
Well,
that.
I
'cause
think the vodka enhanced the flavor.
That's
of
good.
this.
That's really good.
very smooth. That, like you said, that's one of the smoothest ones
Yeah.
I've ever had.
What's
80 proof.
It's 80 proof, and it's as Tim says, light color.
where are they out of?
Good question. I don't know.
It's on the back there. I just saw it back there.
You can see better than I can. California, Mariloma, California. California can't make bourbon.
Well, they sure did a hell of a good job on that.
That's
Yeah,
good.
I like it. It
That's
is
as
good.
smooth a one as I've been in on.
Jesse James.
Yeah.
Jesse James. It's for the outlaw in you.
We had our episode today. We talked about capital punishment and the death penalty, which we talked about being a little dark and But
And we could discuss that in 10 episodes.
we could, and we
and
hope
never get to the end of it.
no. And we were talking off camera a while ago after we got through, and Jason, we were trying to explain what it meant, what the death penalty meant to each of us, and it was hard for all three
Oh,
of us
yeah,
to do.
it's rough.
Yeah. So, I hope all of you listen. It's episode 22. You got some busy stuff going on like we always do? You got anything
I'm on
interesting?
a slow end this week. I've got to go to Raleigh in, 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
But
That'll be interesting.
other than that,
I got to be in Asheville tomorrow on a case. So that'll be good. I can find a good restaurant up there to enjoy and take some time off up there.
I got to go interview an inmate on a case in Statesville tomorrow, but I'm pretty slow right now too. Not. I mean, I've got work to do, but I'm not.
your case at Central Prison, did he accept a plea,
He's
correct?
going to. It's going to be on the up on April the 11th.
But
I
that
think
case, did it not start out as a capital?
it did.
And that's good.
Yeah.
Good for everybody, I think.
And so please give us your feedback, especially on what, like Rhonda did.
Rhonda, thank you.
Yeah.
Chief Mike, thank you.
And that's the last of your gifts.
I think.
That stretched us
Gotta
out
start
for
buying.
22 episodes. That's pretty good.
You're going to start buying it.
I know, Mark. Mark bought
I brought
a couple,
some. I
yeah.
bought the one,
Yeah.
I bought the one the paint can.
Hey, I bought
You bought some
one.
paint thinner?
I bought one. That was a surprise. We got to rate this one. Don't forget.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
All right. We'll start with you, Jay.
I'll give it a 9, a solid
9.
9. Maybe. Yeah, I liked it.
Mark, what do you think?
I'm going to give it a 9.5.
9.5.
Yeah,
9,
good
9.5.
stuff.
Tim?
I'm going to high 8, low 9.
I'll go 8. So it's got a high score. Jesse James Bourbon Whiskey, made in California.
The original Jesse James,
Yeah.
America's Outlaw Bourbon Whiskey.
So I think it was about $20 when I looked it up. So that's cheap
Damn, that's
for
a
bourbon
good price.
for that flavor.
For that
Yeah.
flavor's great.
So anyhow, we're
If you feel like Outlaw, get you a bottle of it.
Listen to some Waylon and Willie.
yeah. Oh, I got one listener that wanted us to drink moonshine.
That's for selling. It ain't for drinking.
Oh, we're gonna drink some maybe if we can get some good. My supplier,
That's a hell of-
my moonshine supplier died.
Mine
Yeah.
did too.
A hell of a good Christmas present back in the day. You
Oh
remember
God,
that?
that's what he gave me. Every
I
year,
know.
a
Well, we
jar of
give them out as
moonshine.
Christmas presents.
And it was
I guess the
so
statute
good.
of limitations is off, expired on that.
And he knew the distiller, of course, and he knew it was clean, and so, and I still got a little bit, so we may have to check that out. We had the one of our viewers put down that he wanted us to try. I can't remember the name of the Cat Square
Cat Square
Square
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Cat Square Kool-Aid.
We ran into that guy at
We
Lowe's,
did.
didn't
We
we?
saw him at Lowe's, so I'd like to bring him in and see if he'll bring some of that Kool-Aid with him, and we can test it.
He was
He's got a hell of a bunch of stories too. He was a
Yeah.
highway patrolman for years, and he's seen it all. He's a good guy. So
I want to give a shout out to all the viewers since we got over our 1,000 mark. Keep listening, subscribing, sharing, commenting. Let your friends know. But we want the comments just like Rhonda did about the vodka. We like to go with the flow on some stuff, and all your comments on the death penalty and any other topics you may want us to talk about, we're open to it. And please just listen to it. If you don't like something, let us know. If you do like something, let us know.
yeah,
Correct.
and any topic that you may feel interesting that we can talk about from a private investigator perspective or law enforcement, family law enforcement perspective, we'll bring it up. I think by Rhonda sending that in, I think it gave us a chance to, okay, let's try this and see what we think. And so, I'm not a vodka drinker, and I think our faces proved that, but we did it
Yeah.
for her. So,
We'll do it again.
yep.
That's that vodka says gluten free. I don't know how other way you could be make a vodka. Do you?
Potato whiskey.
How could it not be?
Well, you can make vodka of different
You can,
things,
yeah.
but potatoes, I
This
think,
is
is
the main
big
easy.
one.
Well, I guess the yeast and all.
Yeah, I really don't know how it's made, but I'm just
Anyhow.
not, that's not a. I mean, I like vodka with different drinks.
Oh yes,
but not
I've never
straight up. So anyhow,
gin.
did we do a gin? We
No.
haven't yet.
I'm not ever going to do a gin.
Well, let me
I'll
tell you
tell
my
you
gin story
Yeah,
real quick. And I'll let you-
gin can go.
Daddies drink gin some. Yeah,
when he didn't have anything else.
Well, he had gin.
Like a gin and
downstairs in the
tonic
bar.
or something.
I don't know what he drunk it with, but a couple of my old buddies, Rick
Water.
Anderson and me, and
Sneak into it.
snuck down there, and we were in high school, and we'd drink his gin.
Pine needles.
It tastes like pine needles. To this day,
I know.
to this day, I can't drink gin because of that. But he caught us. He started marking his bottle,
Yeah.
and then we started putting water in it to try to fool him. And he caught. We were downstairs. We had a little band. We were playing. He come down. He says, "Look, boys." He opened his liquor cabinet. He said, "If you touch my scotch or gin,"
Gin.
he said, "I'm gonna whip all your asses." And so we never got back in his liquor cabinet again. He had a pretty good bar downstairs, though.
I'll tell you a whiskey, or not a whiskey, a liquor that's good is rum. It's not bad.
Rum's
I wanna
good.
bring y'all
Flavored
my,
rum.
Sugar
I wanna
cane.
bring y'all my lemon
Yeah.
rum and Coke.
Yeah, that's some
Give you a
good.
bad
That's
headache.
my,
Yeah,
that's
but
my drink of choice.
Well, supposedly rum doesn't give you a hangover. That's the thing. That's the thing with rum. But I get a headache when I drink vodka.
I about had a all world hangover from vodka. I wouldn't drink orange juice for
I
2
get a
years
headache
after
when
just
I
from
drink too much.
when I
Flashback.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
I said I get a headache when I drink too much.
I fall down.
fall down.
I talk silly. Anyhow.
Anyhow, thank y'all.
Yeah, it's been fun. I
Like and
appreciate
share.
it. Like and share.
Like and share.
This is our last call. Monday afternoon roundtable. Tune in next time. Bye.
See you.